Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Supply Chain. I'm excited to get started, but first, we have a question. This is from Gartner, a major analyst firm. By 2027, what percent of procurement teams will still be cleaning up bad supplier data in order to get the efficiency gains they want from AI? Well, let me know your guesses over on social and keep listening because I'll let you know by the end of the show. So today I'm joined by a company that wants to free you from the chaos of bad supplier data. That's music to your ears, right? Well, who is it? It's Graphite Connect. Graphite Connect makes it simple and secure for buyers and sellers to connect and do business, saving them from endless onboarding and inaccurate data and helping them to move faster, collaborate smarter, and make better decisions. And I'm joined by Conrad Smith, co-founder and CEO. Conrad began his career at Intel before becoming head of procurement at Adobe. He went on to build a 30-plus year career in enterprise procurement before founding Graphite in 2018. So we have a real powerhouse on the show today. We're going to be talking all about Graphite Connect, what they do, building a network to create efficiency on a global scale, speeding up communication amidst tariff turmoil, and bringing you supplier data you can trust. So welcome to the show, Conrad.
Thank you, Sarah. It's really good to be with you.
I am so excited to have you here. I've been wanting to do this episode for so long, and I'm so glad that we're making it happen because I love having founders on the show. I love talking about procurement. I still think it's often underestimated or maybe even a little bit overlooked, but it really is critical and it can actually drive transformation as well. So, in a climate where we need transformation, more than ever, we should all be putting the spotlight onto procurement. So let's do that today. Can we start by learning a little bit more about you? You've been in the industry for over 30 years, worked for some big industry names. So give us a taste of that career journey.
Yeah, I don't know about your experience in procurement. I had no idea what procurement was when I was in college. Like looking back, there are schools, in fact, the schools where I went to BYU and they now have a supply chain program, but they didn't back in the day. I graduated with a biochemistry degree. I didn't want to be a lab tech. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to business. I got an MBA right out. Like I didn't have any real traditional work experience. And then I show up in the work environment and they put me into be a buyer. And I thought buyers was a Nordstrom job. I didn't think it was like an everybody job. And I got to Intel and they were doing procurement with paper, white, pink, yellow, triplicate requisitions. It blew my mind because this was Intel in the 90s was the powerhouse tech company. We know like the big OpenAI and Google and like all these big companies. That Intel was one of the three big powerhouses in the day. And I showed up and they were doing paper. And that sort of started my career into let's gotta be better than this. Let's figure out how to make it better. And there was a whole bunch of things I did on the journey between then and now to just every week, every month, every quarter try and make it better. But yeah, that's been my passion and my journey. Well, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about the steps along the way.
That is so funny because most people who are probably listening to this understand what you mean by those triple layer papers. But some probably don't. And it's when you write on the top layer and then it actually transfers into the other two layers. And then you split them up depending on who gets
Who
that
gets the
piece of
copy?
paper.
Yeah, yeah. I still have one of those. I just kept it. It's in one of my like treasure trove boxes at home because and now it's just like a keepsake almost. Like I guess you can go to the store, you can go to Office Depot or something and buy little triplicate invoice things like that still. But yeah, it's just
Yeah.
not part of enterprise anymore.
That's so funny. Well, with people using Excel still for supplier data, I wouldn't be surprised that there might be some out there that are still using that. I was for logistics and writing checks, I was using a typewriter up until I don't even know, 2012, maybe 2014, which really isn't that long ago. So let's talk about, I mean, you've been in procurement for a while. I'm sure you would have encountered almost every challenge, maybe worked with numerous vendors, and you would have seen a lot firsthand, including those triple papers that we were just talking about. So, what made you think I'm going to pull this all together and launch my own solution? Like, what was your why behind that? I love to hear a good founder story.
Well, I told you, I just like to make it work better. So when I got to Adobe, I think our process time was something like 40 something days, which was too much. Like people were complaining. I rolled up my sleeves. I started doing all the traditional things you do with legal to like collaborate and, build new processes and all the
Right.
rest of those things. And we got it down to like 7 or 8 days. It was a huge win. We were all really excited. There was a bunch of stuff that contributed to that. And then all of a sudden, legal came back and says it's time we got to do this in compliance, and we got to do this in cyber, and we got to do this in privacy. So it just took that right back up to another month and a half to get anything done. And, I kind of stepped back and said, well, this is not actually going to fix itself for any of us, right? I was participating in the Bay Area Procurement Council at the time, a bunch of CPOs just getting together talking procurement. And I posed this idea. All of us are collecting supplier data from the same suppliers. We're all sending these blank forms out to the city. Why don't we do this together like a co-op? You do Microsoft, I'll do IBM, you do Cisco. Let's just do it together and then we'll share the stuff. And everybody loved the idea. In the beginning, I thought, I want my cake and eat it too. So I'm going to stay at Adobe. It was a beautiful job. I loved it. I love my team. I love the company. So let's get Adobe to like sponsor the build out of this cooperation between procurement teams. And that just like didn't work, right? The traditional, I mean, you hear the story all the time with startups that the parent business is like, that's not the business we're in. You're going to need to leave. And so that's kind of how it went. It was like, hey, if you really believe in this and you want to go do it, you're going to have to go do it outside the company.
Hmm.
But I believe we're now, I don't know, it's probably almost 10 years since that decision took place originally inside of me.
Hmm.
It just like turns into, if any of, like, if I don't know if Sarah, well, you kind of have your own thing here. So you've had it, right? You get this thing inside you that's like, hey, I should do this. And it's like having a virus inside you. It just grows. You think about it at night when you wake up, you think about it in the car, and then pretty soon it's like, this is actually, and I believe it still, this is what's needed in business to change things because it's getting worse in
Yeah.
terms of effort, right? We've
Yeah.
got cyber and privacy and compliance are like the foundation, but labor concerns, modern slavery, child labor, ethical sourcing, carbon, conflict minerals, safety, the list of things that are like coming our direction with regulations is more than what we've already implemented. And so it's a train wreck, honestly.
Well, and it takes a certain kind of person to be an entrepreneur in the first place, right? Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Like you said, you think about it when you go to sleep, you think about it when you wake up. There's all sorts of things that you have to deal with that you don't actually realize until you're in the role as an entrepreneur. But when you're also talking about all the responsibilities just for procurement leaders, like you said, cybersecurity, anti-slavery. I actually have been doing some focus groups recently with some chief procurement officers around anti-slavery, and it's been absolutely fascinating to find out what they think about how they deal with vendors and suppliers and how much responsibility they have to take versus the vendor just to make sure everything is on the up and up and what concessions need to be made. There's so much going on for procurement professionals, procurement leaders. It's crazy, and somebody needs to be able to step in and help with that. And when you were talking about the 40 days to the 7 days, I've been dealing with a client right now trying to get an agreement signed, and that's taken almost 60 days so far, and I still don't have it signed because of everything that they have to go through within their organization, which I get. But you're talking about 40 days to 7 days, back up to 40 because everything that we need to consider. I'm almost at 60 days with mine.
We have one of our clients when we met them, they were at 90 days. They're in fintech and health tech, so they're highly regulated. And we have them down to 8 days now. So
Wow.
making things better is really possible, but we can't. I started in procurement with a fax machine. I know that predates a lot of people. One of my
Not
team members
me.
is like, Conrad's been doing procurement longer than I've been alive. So I don't feel that old, but I look that old and I am that old, right? So I've been around a long time. So fax machine procurement actually worked really well. And if you think about the technological transformation from like snail mail paper to the fax machine, that was life changing, right? You don't just put it in a box and hope it gets to the other side. you like push a button on this machine, and the moments a paper comes out the other side. It's like this magic that happened in when the fax machine era. But today, what's the difference between a fax machine and an email? It isn't the same magnitude of improvement as snail mail to fax machine. It's like, okay, cool. It's not like a printed piece of paper. It shows up in an inbox electronic, but it's kind of the same thing. And we've got to figure out how to move past that one-to-one sharing of information. Sarah, I'm a little bit embarrassed in our function, honestly. I've been at this for 30 years, and the kinds of things I see every day in big companies, this isn't just, hey, you're a brand new team and you don't know better or you don't have the resources.
Right.
We're just stuck. We're
Yeah.
stuck in it. And we've talked about automation, we talked about catalogs, we talked about all these things, and I'm not saying that they haven't helped, but the procurement leaders of today have more to do than they've ever had to do in the past. I mean, they're essentially the head of procurement and the head of supplier risk, and it's a hard job to do. And most of them, I don't know if you've seen the research from Hackett. Hackett says 50% of all organizations are managing and collecting supplier data through emails of all these sizes. And the ones that aren't are using these other existing tools, and they're unhappy with them because they kind of said, well, we're implementing, I'm not going to pick on anybody. I'm going to say some names, but they're all in there the same, like an Ariba, a Coupa, a Jagger, a GEP. Like, we're using one of these and we're still unhappy with managing suppliers because they're not designed for that.
Right. Right.
So
but I also think the decision on which technology to use and how to figure that out, and if it doesn't work out, people's jobs are on the line. And I think that could be also a bit of a reason why we are stuck, depending on the environment and the culture and whether they're allowed to sort of play and figure out what's going to work and what's not work, or a component over here, a component over there. I think until we really get into that kind of environment, and there are a couple of companies that are doing that, but until we get there, I think we are going to be stuck because everybody's just going to go back to what they know and what's going to keep them in that job, because taking some of that risk on top of everything else that they have to do on a day-to-day basis is scary. So let's dive into what Graphite Connect does, because I want to know, like, who are you? What do you do? How do you help your customers? Because I'm pretty sure you're one of the platforms that are going to help them and take that risk out of the equation for them.
So when we started Graphite, the way we described it was holistic vendor management, end to end. And that was the website. That was how I talked to people about it. And I felt like I was just talking to people that had no clue what I was trying to describe. And, through a sequence of sort of learning from conversations, what became very clear is, well, supplier management starts with onboarding-ish. You could say there's one or two small steps before, but that step is the one that everyone's like struggling the most with. So if you talk to people out there, they'll say, well, Graphite's the supplier onboarding company. And it's like, and technology, sure, that's true, because that's where the relationship starts. But as you continue on in the relationship, yes, you need to collect the commercial data up in front, but if the commercial data changes a year or 2 or 5 later, you've got to change that as well. So data isn't like once and done. Data is constantly changing. And by the way, that also means that copy of the data that all of your customers have about you is aging. Unless you're just constantly chasing around and updating everybody everywhere with all your data elements, whatever copy they got 6 years ago is the copy they have, right? And that's crazy when you think about it. It's business kind of gets pouring cement around your business that you don't have control over changing. And it's really difficult. Who changes their cell phone number anymore? Because I'm going to have to update 7,000 people that I have a new number. It's the same kind of an idea. And I've actually talked to companies that are like, we deliberately decided not to move office locations, even though there was a better option, because changing the company address and the concern about, losing checks in the mail and all this other, it just wasn't worth it.
It's so true. I even think about like when I got married. I didn't want to change my last name. I'd had it for over 30 years. So in public, I hyphenated it.
Yeah. Well, you
have to update so many things.
And anyway, so you have the commercial data, you have the risk data. Risk data refreshes are happening every year. So now you're talking about starting a process at onboarding that really cycles with many of your suppliers every year. And then with more mature organizations, you start asking questions like, well, are we going to have quarterly business reviews? Who are the preferred suppliers? Are we doing performance management with them? All these things that are kind of in and around the relationship. So I would take procurement and I would divide it into two parts. I would say one part is transaction management and one part is relationship management. And of course, your P2P platform, your ERP does all that transactions. They're really built for that. Graphite is purpose built for the relationship side, which in the case of what we're talking about means it has a different architecture.
Yeah.
Like all of this one-to-one sharing of information breaks down quickly, but if you can move from the one-to-one architecture to a many-to-many, then it's like LinkedIn. It's like a social network where, like, imagine you just have a profile of Sarah in one place, and anybody that's connected to you, as soon as you change your phone number or your name or your address or anything, everybody gets that. Just like LinkedIn tells me you have a new job,
Right.
Graphite tells me you have a new bank account or you have a new legal
Huh.
entity name or a new DBA, or it just completely sort of tips the management of the data and puts it truly back in control of the organization that it's describing.
Well, and you can trust it and not have to think about it again. You can put that into the system and not have to think about it again, or second guess that one of your vendors didn't get updated, or did I update them? I don't know. Maybe I'll just email them to find out, right? And then
Yeah.
that's emails back and forth that nobody wants because nobody wants any more emails in their inbox. So I love that. And I love the fact that it focuses on relationship as well, because relationship is really a huge part of procurement. Like your relationship with your vendors and having to onboard them, having that trust factor, making sure that they're updated in real time because they don't want to have to go through all of that either. So let's talk about who your ideal client is. Who are they? What do they look like? Do you have one?
So it's a great question. I'm going to, from a go-to-market perspective, there's this definition, the ideal customer profile. This
Right.
is the person that we want to go sell to. For our purposes, it's people that have a big, hairy problem
Hmm.
and they're willing to give us a lot of money to solve the problem. And they have a lot of suppliers that they want to bring to the network. Those are great customers for ours because they have so much pain that we can help them tremendously.
Mm,
But it doesn't mean that if you're smaller, you don't have proportionally a similar amount of pain.
right.
Each smaller, we have customers that are really quite small from an organization, a revenue size, number of suppliers and team perspective. And we have some that are 100 or 200,000 employees in the company. So
Mhm.
everybody that's working with suppliers, everybody has this problem. It's just a question of, do you have like a team of 10 people managing supplier data or 20 or 30, or do you have two or three or a half a person managing supplier data? And so, as you kind of scale up to the larger organizations, our solution tends to be more purpose configured for them. And on the
Right.
lower end, out of the box, best practice, ready to go. And for those organizations, that's what they want and need anyway. Right? Hey, I don't have a center of excellence of 5 people to go design a bunch of stuff. I just need you to tell me what works the best and boom, let's go. So
Huh.
really, virtually anybody with a procurement team is who we want to talk to and engage with.
I might have to talk to you after this interview. We'll have to see because I might be a little bit too small, but hopefully
You
it.
should listen, Sarah. You should have a profile on Graphite. Let me say another little piece of this. Like,
Okay.
but when you put your data out into the world,
Mhm.
like let's say you have 1,000 customers and you give them your data, you now have vulnerabilities on 1,000 pieces of your data as well. So
Mhm.
that means that someone can get a hold of your email, they can go to one of those customers, they can tell that customer this is the new bank account, and you're kind of out of that loop. But if
Right.
your customer always gets that data from Graphite, and any change to the bank data requires you to prove that you are who you say you are, which is how we work, it now insulates you from a huge risk that's out there today as well. So
Mm.
even on the supplier side, there's a lot of benefit to having a profile. And when somebody's like, hey, I need your bank data, instead of just emailing it to them or something, it's like, okay, here's my Graphite profile. You click it, you share it, and they have it in a safe and encrypted way. So,
So we are going to talk about this after we finish this show, but you might have a new customer already just from us recording this, and we haven't even released it yet.
well, you don't need to pay either. Suppliers don't pay us. So, happy customer, yes. Happy supplier, even better.
All right, let's do it. So, let's dive into a little bit of the biggest challenges that your ideal customer has. I know you just sort of shared it when we talked about my example. But after 30 years in the industry, where do you see businesses now? What are the challenges on both sides for both buyers and sellers? I like that you talked about the risk and the data and having the information out there and where is it stored and are we emailing back and forth bank accounts? I mean, that just sparked for me. That's exactly something that I need support on. But talk to me about some of the bigger challenges.
I call this supplier data and risk thing the biggest hairball in procurement. And
Hairball. Do you have
just,
cats?
I
Okay,
don't
I'm just
actually,
asking because you
I
just
can tell you about cats that come to my house every night and leave their messages behind for me. But this hairball is like, it's just a big problem. And I don't know, nobody's that clear about the problem. And I say that because when I started the business, I thought, okay, we kind of missed the GDPR wave. There was all this
okay.
technology investment around GDPR, and we came at the kind of at the tail end of that. I can't tell you how many companies I talk to every week that say the executive staff is really upset, procurement's not working. They're getting a lot of escalations from the business. Everything's going too slow. It's a real problem. We need some help. Now, I think that there's a lot of investment going into procure tech today and a lot of investment going to all sorts of businesses around the technology that they're investing. I can tell you definitively today, if you don't solve this hairball, no matter what other technology you layer into the middle of it, you're not going to satisfy your customers,
Right.
the requesters, the business stakeholders, because ultimately what I see happening is business is going faster. I've seen the data of like, how fast people get into technology and kind of the curve keeps getting steeper and steeper. Business is just accelerating like crazy. And then you ask yourself, do I think procurement is going faster or slower than it was 10 years ago? What's your take? Faster or slower?
Well, I mean, with that example that I just said about 60 days from from the point that I sent the agreement, we're still sort of talking about it and it's going through legal and compliance and all that kind of stuff. I would say it's slower. If you started at 40 and I'm now at 60.
And by the way, if you had been doing this 20 years ago, I guarantee it wouldn't have been 40 days.
Mm,
Um, this happens in a lot of organizations. And by the way, business friction is a real problem.
hmm
And it's one of these things where it's like you can't just evaporate friction because there are suppliers and there are situations where risk is a significant concern. You
Yeah.
need friction in some places. But I'm sorry, Sarah. I don't know what you're doing for these businesses, but I don't think you're a high risk
I
supplier
don't
that should
think
be
so.
taking 60 days. It should take like 6 minutes. Get her stuff, set her up, let's go. And so what happens is the business is dealing with somebody like you,
Mhm,
or maybe even somebody more embedded in a critical product or a go to
mhm.
market or one of these other things. The business is just throwing up their hands going, the
Right.
executive staff's expecting us to deliver this month, and you're telling me it's going to take 60 days? That's not acceptable.
I
So
think
they're
it was,
going around.
well, and sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it was
Oh,
70 emails back and forth.
think of the cost, right? The
Oh, I
cost to them, the cost to you. At
know.
a certain point, you're just like, you know what, people, I'll go find another customer that isn't so hard to deal with. So, so I mean, you're asking like, what's really happening inside a business that's making this important?
hmm
Business is this again, it's this hairball in the middle of it all that I don't think everyone's. Maybe it's not politically correct to say we we can't do cyber like that, or we can't do privacy like that, or we can't do compliance like that because those are presented as risks, and risk often feels like a blank check. We have to go to 12 nines of risk, or like it's bad for the
Right.
business. And I love risk teams. I've worked with a ton of them, but if you hire risk professionals, just like they wake up and they go to sleep every night terrified about the thing that could go wrong. And so they're
Right.
building that level of scrutiny into everything that's happening. And the
hmm
reality is, like I said, Sarah's not high risk. Sarah should go through the 6 minute process, not the 60-day process.
Right.
But you need a technology and a process that gives them the confidence that you're not just going to slip through as a really risky in their process. If it's like, oh, I need to talk to her anyway. Who knows? She might be that one person that puts us on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So,
I would hope not. That I
hey,
wouldn't be in business. But I think the other
good.
really important thing here too is you're talking about us sharing important data over email. And everybody's talking about cybersecurity and risk, and they're going through all of these exercises to make sure that we don't click on the wrong links. But at the end of the day, we're still sharing really important information by email. And they're trying to cut that down, and they're putting all these, things in place so when you try to email somebody, it goes to spam. I don't know about you, but most of our emails go to spam now. So the client doesn't even see when we're asking them for something, and then it takes days to figure it out. So even with that in place anyways, email is not a very good option for business regardless. If you're sending an email for the first time, they're never going to see it anymore. You're sending important critical data through there. So how do you help sort of ease that pressure? Like, we've talked about how important it is and how much time it takes for teams and, trying to establish a new relationship with somebody. I mean, there's so much pressure around it. You just talked about it, right? The risk, the compliance, the legal. What if they put us on the front page of the Wall Street Journal? How do you ease that pressure?
Well, I would say, and this is me talking from personal experience, my response to all of this was, as the head of procurement at Adobe, like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, legal, cyber, and these other teams are going to slow down my process that I've worked so hard to tidy up. And
Right.
that's not a reputation I need. No, I'm not going to be responsible for that. So when somebody complains, I'm like, oh, well, you need to talk to so and so in legal or cyber because it's their process that's broken. It's not my process. My first encouragement to all procurement leaders is to quickly get past the denial phase and go, this is my process end to end. I'm the voice of the customer. It's my responsibility to fix it. So if what I own end to end isn't good enough for the business, then I got to be the kind of leader that can change it, influence the change in the organization, bring people together, and take charge of it that way. Independent of technology, be that leader. So you're no longer the CPO, you're also the chief supplier risk officer. Like, own it and go back to these risk teams and the organization and whatever it is, and representing the that you're supporting the way they need to be supported to make money. We're all here to enable business success. And until we become that actively engaged in their success, I think we're not going to be able to get around this. And then you get down, right? From there, you just have to break down the problem and start working on solving it.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point around risk. Do we know what the risk tolerance is of the organization? Right? Because you're talking about bringing in, risk consultants who, their risk tolerance is going to be they're not going to have any. And then you've got procurement where you're like, well, we need a little bit of risk in what we're doing to be able to be move forward and it not take a year for us to onboard a new supplier. So I feel like there's also a little it's discombobulated. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I didn't say the right word. But you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
If we're
Yeah.
not on
Yeah.
the same page as the risk tolerance of the business, how do we even move our feet out of the mud?
Yeah. Well, and again, this gets back to leadership, right? Because it's a perfect time. People listening to this podcast today, I guarantee you their executive staff is telling them that procurement's broken and you need to fix it.
Hmm.
What that does is unlocks a mandate for you to actually step up your leadership to the next level.
Hmm.
Like you talked about, like, well, what is the buffer? Like, I don't know, let's have that discussion as a leadership team. Can we run business at a 60-day onboarding cycle?
Right.
And I guarantee the executive staff's going to say, NFW, that's not going to work, right? And say, okay, well, 30, 20, like what is it? And kind of build out with the leadership team and say, okay, realizing that, by the way, when you go to 100 days, somewhere between, I don't know, I'd say 10 days and 100 days, the business just works around you. So you think you're being very risk averse, and what happens is, the enterprising partner that you have just says, nope, and they go right around you and they start working, sadly, they're not doing it for you this time, but they start working with Sarah, say, you're working, you think everything's great. And then you're like 3 months into the relationship and procurement calls and says, hey, what's up with this? Like, you're not in our database.
Yeah.
That's what the
Yeah.
business does. And then that goes all the way around all of the risk that they're pretending like Eloise talks about risk theater. And this is exactly what that turns into, right? Because you make it look like you're controlling risk. And in the end, there's this crossover point, like a cost curve that says, beyond this point, you're actually, you're growing risk instead of reducing the risk. So figure out the budget, be a leader, and then go back and lead that back into the organization.
Well, I have an example of that because I had another customer who just recently told me that because their procurement process was taking too long to sign our agreement again. And they told me recently that they pushed it through. They didn't even put it through legal because they were already taking too long and they knew that they needed to get in our system because we do release dates based on first come, first serve, and they wanted a particular one. So when you
Clean up
talk about them working again around it, that is a really good example that just happened.
happens every day. Happens every day. We kind
Yeah.
of call this thing after the fact purchase orders and all these other words we put on it that have changed over 30 years, but it's essentially things are escaping our process, which isn't just the contract and the PO process. It's also all this risk stuff we're trying to build. So
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, I'd be a terrible founder not to just say, look, we have the technology we built to directly address this problem. It's not easy to fix on your own. And one of the real, like, if you do the Six Sigma analysis here, say what is taking the most time, the thing that takes the most time is the supplier's response.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
And if
second thing that takes the most time is your internal team to actually look at the 500 questions they asked the supplier to fill out. Those are the two big problems. And so, Graphite's network approach here means, Sarah, once you have a profile or once that supplier's in Graphite and another customer comes into Graphite and says, okay, I need this information, you're not blank farming it. Like this is
right.
like a LinkedIn connection. Like this is like minutes. This isn't like weeks and hours to get it back. So
Yeah.
automate for the supplier, and we do really cool stuff. And on the horizon is even cooler stuff with AI to make their job easier to fill out these profiles.
Well, so before we get into that, I want to go back to May because you launched Rapid Response, which is a new feature for your platform. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that, why it's so crucial, how it helps your customers?
Yeah. So if you think about your traditional onboarding forms, they're very structured. I need your name, address, tax, banking, and this cyber stuff. I mean, you fill them out, right? So they're
Mhm.
all basically the same. But as you get into managing this relationship, things happen, right? Like most recent one that got all that we all kind of, I don't know, gasped through was and still going through is tariffs.
Mhm.
So the first thing that happens with the tariff is executive teams like, well, which of our suppliers are most impacted and what does that look like? And I don't know, call procurement. And then they call procurement, and procurement's like, oh, and then you're into this mode where you're preparing some sort of questionnaire and you're putting it in an email and you're sending it out to the supplier. And then guess what? Email is not a good way to do this, not just because of all the security things we talked about, but you just fired off 3,000 emails. And
Right.
tomorrow you need to know who responded. And so
Mhm.
now you have someone with a spreadsheet watching inboxes, doing check boxes and cutting and pasting and doing all this stuff, right? So rapid response is a way to deal with these sort of out of cycle-ish
Mhm.
questions that you have for your suppliers. It could be a pandemic, right? It could be tariffs. It could be remember last summer when, what was it, CrowdStrike shut down
Mhm.
the world for a bit and the airlines for a long time, some of them for surprisingly long. Everybody was in this mode. I got emails as a business like, "Hey, are you guys impacted?" And everyone's just like says running around asking everybody about this question, and it should just again be part of the profile.
But also, I think about procurement teams, and when you talk about sending out 3,000 emails, let's say, to suppliers, we thought about sales, right? Because the moment you send out like 10 or 11 emails about something that you're doing in sales to try to get some sales, you have to remember to follow up with all of those people. And procurement's not necessarily set up for that because they're not necessarily a sales part of an organization. And so having to also teach that to your teams and having to stay on top of that and follow up with that, I mean, just a lot of time wasted.
Yeah, the email you have to track the email.
Yeah.
People didn't respond. You got to follow back up on the email. And when you get the emails, like I said, you're cutting and pasting data out of the emails. You're assembling spreadsheets into a master. Like it's just huge amount of manual work. So rapid response is really designed to be like, okay, well, there are these standard supplier management questionnaires and libraries, but something like CrowdStrike or the tariffs or the pandemic, those were not anticipated. Someone came to tomorrow. Someone's gonna come to work tomorrow or next week, and it's gonna be like, whatever the next big thing is, we need to ask. Okay,
Mhm.
we need to make that really easy and fit it into all the power and structure and automation that we've already built and connections, right? Because we're
Yeah.
now connected with all of your suppliers in Graphite really easily. So that they just get a task. Hey, I need to answer these questions. And
Right.
guess what? You answer these questions about the tariff here, well, it's not a good one because that could get into different products and SKUs and even more complexity. But they answer the question about the pandemic here, and then it's the answers are available for many of their customers that are coming and asking the same questions
Yeah,
as
well,
well.
think about a cybersecurity attack on one of your vendors or something like that. Even, you were talking about CrowdStrike, but it could happen to any of your vendors at any time. And you also need to be able to ask them certain questions and what it affected and
Yep.
all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. And so you need that sort of rapid response because you have to be able to get there fast. Now, I'm going to ask you about AI, but I'm going to ask you near the end because I really want to get into sharing a real life customer story. We've talked about examples. We've used Let's Talk Supply Chain as a bit of an example, but can you share with us, sort of one customer story? What was the challenge? How did they work with you? What was the ROI and benefit that they saw?
So I'm going to pick between a bunch of different customers. One of the ones that I get most excited about, and it's on our website if anyone wants to go find it, the story here. There's a business in the Midwest called Casey's. Casey's, I didn't know about Casey's because we all know the convenience stores down the street from where we live. Casey's is a convenience store kind of business in the Midwest. They have almost 3,000 convenience stores in the
Hmm.
smallest towns. They are number 5 largest pizza seller in the nation because this is where all these small towns get their pizza. So they sell gas, groceries, and pizza to these really small communities across the Midwest. It's a really cool business. When we met them, they were actually struggling because they had tried to find supplier data technologies and processes to really streamline this problem for them. Again, it's the hairball. Everybody has it. We implemented Graphite and we took their process, the number of people that they had. So they had 3 people dedicated to managing the supplier data full time. And we got that from 3 people down to 15 hours for one person per week. So sort of went down dramatically in terms of the time and effort that it took them to manage through the process. So if you think about the levers of value that you need to get here, one of them is the end-to-end process clock time needs to decrease. Okay, that did. We brought that down by we cut 75% of the time out of the process, which is typical
Wow.
for us. And then
Okay.
you got it. Okay, so it goes faster, but you don't want to add more people to make it faster. We actually took people out of the process as well. And then one of the third real key areas of value is the improved data quality because this data, you talked earlier about like how important this is in business. I think about the hierarchy of needs, like Maslow hierarchy of needs, like a pyramid. Is the foundation of the level. Like you have to have good data, and on top of that, you build your transactions, and then on top of that, you build sourcing and negotiations, and then you can just kind of work your way up to relationships. And the very top is innovation and design, but all of that sits on good data. And so if you don't have the good data, you have problems. So the speed of the process, the resources invested, and the quality of the data.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And it just goes to show, I mean, cutting 75% of time spent on supplier data, but also you talked about how data is changing all the time. And so, how do you keep on top of that? There's only so much somebody can do to stay on top of it, and something's going to slip through the cracks, and you're going to have the wrong banking information or address or phone number or what have you. It could be even worse where maybe they've shut down and you can't use them anymore, but you sent them an order, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I know we need to wind this down. We have so much to talk about though, but this has been great. And I want to end on AI and automation. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody knows they have to implement it. Everybody knows that within the next 2 years, AI and automation is really going to be here to stay in a variety of ways. Everybody's kind of trying to test it out and all that kind of stuff. So, talk to me about how you're thinking about AI and automation at Graphite and how you sort of see the future of procurement.
So it's a great question. uh, Even humanity, like I was just before I called you, we were having this little Slack chat about how AI is going to change humanity, relationships between parents and children, and like everything's changing, right? Um, I think what's really important to understand about AI is AI eats data. AI lives on data. Like that is what makes it work. And I think there's a false belief, either consciously or subconsciously in people's mind, that AI is going to fix this hairball. Like I have an AI wand and I'm just going to wave it and I'm going to all of a sudden have clean supplier data.
Mm-hmm.
like I hate to break your bubble on this, but it's not going to work that way. Like the next, several generations down the road, if they have access to libraries of great data and everyone's sharing all their data, maybe those AI tools can get you to 80% quality or something. Kind of the same kind of things that you would get today if you like supplier data to GEP or somebody else. There's services that do supplier data cleanup today, and they're using a lot of the same algorithms and everything else to clean it up. But you need better data than that. So particularly if you're going to rely on this at speed, it's one thing to have data that like the engine behind your automation, but once you say this is the fuel of the decisions that we're making, you got to go from 80% okay to what are the implications of that 20% that's not okay. So I
Right.
would really encourage people as they're thinking about AI. And by the way, there's a lot that we can do to kind of gear up for AI, including just learning about it. But the best way to get prepared for AI is to clean up your data, like get your data ready for AI. And I know there's a lot of people that kind of share my sentiment on this. I'm not alone. Like get ready, data ready. We can help you do that. Once the data is clean and ready, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff that can happen that you can trust is, going to work quite well.
Yeah. Well, and also, I can't believe we're talking about getting data ready even in 2025 because I feel like I've been talking about it on the show for a long time. But I think with everything changing and data coming in and out, right? And I think there has to be process around it. So I think you have to get the data right, but you also have to have a process around it in how you're going to constantly be able to clean that up and make sure you've got the right data moving forward, right?
I love that. It's like data hygiene, right? Like you
Yeah.
need to clean it, but you need to keep. I think about data like that zucchini in the bottom drawer of your fridge. Like it's only edible for so long, and then you don't even want to look at it. You just kind of like put it over into the trash, right? Like it's bad, it looks bad, and you need to stay away from it. So yeah, hygiene around this is super important. So the
Yeah.
process of keeping it clean and frankly, I've got to say this. So if people hasn't clicked for everybody, Graphite's like LinkedIn. Like think how much the resume and this whole who I am in my career changed when LinkedIn became the pervasive network of this is who I am. That's exactly what Graphite is for companies. And so now they can actually manage one source of truth,
Mm.
and all of their customers have access to that one source of truth, just like you manage. And not everybody keeps their LinkedIn up to date, but even those that don't, it's how we can connect with old colleagues that was impossible before. Just as a silly example, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, it's be so transformational in terms of how it simplifies keeping the data clean. Your 100 or 500 or 1,000 customers that have little pockets of your data scattered all over the world, like we're now saying no, like it's in one place. Sarah just
Yeah.
manages it in one place. And when she makes changes in that one place, it like the subscriptions just pull it right up into everybody's systems and they have your latest and greatest, most data.
We are doing this, Conrad. I'm super excited. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the incredible ways you're enabling leading enterprises to manage risk, decrease cycle times, and unlock the power of real networks at work. Procurement is at the heart of our industry, and you've really been able to highlight how important collaboration, clean data, connection, relationships are to keep this industry moving. So, did you have a guess at today's big question? Well, at the top of the show, I asked you by 2027, what percent of procurement teams will still be cleaning up bad supplier data in order to get the efficiency gains they want from AI? Well, the answer from Gartner is 85%. Please don't be
Wow.
part of the 85% and give Conrad and his team a call because in 2027, you don't want to still be cleaning up bad supplier data. And you definitely don't want to be left behind and you want to protect your AI investments. So, if you're looking for a partner to help you onboard 85% faster, manage risk, and free yourself from the chaos of bad supplier data, head over to graphiteconnect.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show, and check out more content from the best and brightest over on letstalksupplychain.com. We've got incredible guests, innovative strategies, and transformative solutions you can't afford to miss. A massive thanks, Conrad, for joining me on the show today, and to the team at Graphite Connect for making this episode happen. Until next time, I'm Sarah Barnes Humphrey, and this is Let's Talk Supply Chain.
Awesome.